Mother, beginning tomorrow, these are the fresh duties you'll handle in this home. Renata's declaration lingered in my mind as I scanned the document she'd thrust into my hands. It wasn't a mere idea. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. My daughter, right here in my residence, was assigning me a shift schedule like I was some fresh recruit as a housemaid. If you're against it, she went on, her tone icy, a sharpness she'd mastered in recent months, you can gather your belongings and go. The place requires someone who truly contributes, not a body just occupying room. My fingers shook while I went over the roster. 6 a.m. Rise and fix breakfasts. 7. Outfit the children and drop them off at school. 8. Tackle the overall household tidying. 9. Launder and air out the clothes. 10. Whip up lunch. The agenda dragged on slot by slot right up to 11 p.m., when this outline said I ought to be pressing outfits for tomorrow. And clearly Gustavo chimed in from the sofa, not bothering to glance away from his screen. This covers footing the household bills, too. That's the purpose of your retirement check. No. I froze in the center of my own den, the very spot where I'd cradled Renata at her birth 34 years back, where I'd marked her milestones with parties, where I'd soothed her through those early romantic pains. Yet now, that same offspring regarded me with a frostiness that pierced my soul. "You haven't got long to choose, Mom," she remarked, applying a vivid pink to her nails. "Gustavo's already consulted an attorney. With over 2 years of us residing here and upholding the property, we've got claims. So you can serve as our staff and remain or depart, and we'll hold on regardless." The ultimatum hung heavy. In my property, title under my name, my girl was strong-arming me. Submit to being her live-in aide, covering costs and toiling without end, or get evicted while they seized it all. "Mull it carefully," Renata pressed on, puffing gently on her new manicure. "At your stage in life, where on a $600 monthly stipend will you secure shelter. Here at minimum, you've got shelter and meals, plus daily glimpses of your grandkids, unless you'd rather hole up solo in some dingy cubby." Gustavo unleashed a harsh chuckle. "Moreover, dear, face facts. What other path awaits you? This at least gives you purpose. Beats lounging with the television like typical seniors your age. My little ones sprawled on the rug, absorbed in their devices, unaware of the exchange crumbling my reality. 8-year-old Ethan glanced my way briefly and queried, "Nana, will you fix some treats? I'm starving." It was the harshest routine. To them, I was merely the caretaker, the fixer-upper, the scrubber, the chef, the server. Not the Nana who adored them, not the lady who'd labored 4 decades to claim this abode, just the gratis helper forever on call. "Listen, Mom." Renata rose and approached, resting a patronizing palm on my arm. "It's not like we lack affection for you. We cherish you deeply. That's precisely why we're offering this chance to remain. Still, shifts must occur. The home demands structure, and somebody's got to oversee the operations. And why must that somebody be me?" I finally murmured, summoning words amid this horrific exchange for the first time. "Since you're the idle one," Gustavo shot back, eyes still glued to his gadget. "We labor, we learn, we shoulder genuine loads. You merely draw your benefits and idle away." It stung like a sharp strike. 40 years as an office clerk in a public agency, 40 years rising at dawn's crack, enduring a pair of bus rides to the job, scrimping each cent to afford this dwelling. 40 years solo parenting Renata, post her dad's desertion when she was merely 3. "Idle away," I echoed, the phrase strangling in my throat. These decades upholding the home, settling accounts, stocking your groceries, minding your offspring during your outings, scrubbing your garments, erasing your chaos. "That counts as nothing, Mom." Renata cut in with that smug grin I'd come to despise. "That's routine for any resident. The shift now is structure, set timetables to streamline it all." I surveyed my parlor. The pieces I'd acquired through endless toil lay battered. The hide couch, paid off over 2 grueling years, bore grease spots and rips from the children's unchecked leaps. The timber-side table, once my treasure, sported rings from beverages and saucers that nobody ever patted. Along the partitions, my kin portraits had yielded to film ads Gustavo favored. My reading assortment sat boxed in the shed, displaced for the consoles and tech toys they endlessly acquired using my handouts. Besides, Renata went on, inspecting her nails contentedly, this will do you a world of good. It'll give you some direction. You've been looking so down and uninterested these days. Taking on solid duties will boost your self-esteem. The scheming was blatant. It stung deep inside. She was pitching my own captivity like it was a kindness they were offering, as if turning into their unpaid helper was some kind of healing for my mental health. Plus, you'll handle weekends, Gustavo chimed in, glancing up from his phone at last. Saturdays mean thorough scrubbing of the place, and Sundays are for cooking up the family's meals for the week ahead. We're not trying to be harsh with you, dear. We just want everything to feel like a proper household. Like a proper household, I echoed inwardly, as fury started to overtake the disbelief. This isn't a proper household. It's the home I purchased and kept up, where I took you all in when you had no roof over your heads. Sure, but we're family now, Renata shot back with that warped reasoning that silenced me. And in a family, everybody pulls their weight in specific ways. Ours is bringing in the cash, yours is managing the household. It's only right. Valerie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, came over and pulled at my skirt. Grandma, can I get some cookies? The kind up on the fridge. I gazed at her and caught in her eyes that same hopeful gleam I'd noticed in her mother's back when she was little. The belief that Grandma never turns down a request, always sorts things out, always there on call. But this time, that hope carried an enforced timetable, an unspoken agreement, a veiled warning. In just a sec, sweetheart, I said, stroking her hair. No, Renata cut in abruptly. Valerie, your grandma's sticking to a fresh routine now. If you need anything, wait for the proper moment to ask. It's 4 p.m. right now, and per the plan, she's prepping snacks at this hour anyway. I headed to the kitchen on shaky legs, each footfall dragging me further into a pit I wasn't sure I'd climb out of. The timetable stayed clutched in my grip, wrinkled from how tightly I squeezed it. It felt like gripping my personal verdict of despair. When I swung open the cupboard, its bareness hit me. A few crumbled cookies at the base of a box, a dated tin of tuna, and barely half a sack of rice. The fridge fared little better. A couple of yogurts Renata had grabbed just for herself, one of Gustavo's beers, and scraps from a dinner 3 days past that nobody else touched. "Grandma, no cookies left," Valerie called from the other room, her tone carrying that same rush she'd picked up from her mom. "On my way, darling," I called back, fully aware I'd need to make do with scraps, or whatever they'd allowed to linger in my own space. I caught the click of Renata's heels drawing near. They rang with a command that was new to these walls. It was like that single sheet of paper had crowned her the undisputed ruler of it all. "Mom, since you're in there, I meant to mention, you've got to hit the store first thing tomorrow. I've jotted down all the essentials," she announced, slapping another note onto the fridge door. "It's roughly $150 in supplies. Oh, and swing by the drugstore for the kids' vitamins plus Gustavo's fancy shampoo. $150. That was 1/4 of my pension each month, gone on 1 week's haul for a crew that now claimed my funds as their due." "Renata, my check won't cover that weekly," I said, my words coming out faint even in my own domain. "Oh, Mom, same old story," she huffed theatrically. "You realize Gustavo's stashing away for our place someday. We can't dip into our earnings for meals and daily stuff. Plus, you dine with us daily. It's only fair you chip in for the costs." The reasoning spun me into a whirl. Gustavo was banking for his future pad while crashing for free in mine. He devoured my provisions and relied on my labor. And me, the true deed holder, footing the bill to serve as their gratis maid. "What if the funds fall short?" I ventured. though I could guess her retort. Then make it work. Prioritize the essentials. The kids deserve decent meals. Mom, you can't hoard cash when there are young ones around. Hoard my own earnings in my own space. The term pierced me like a blade to the heart. Gustavo showed up in the doorway yawning like he'd just stirred from sleep. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and there he was in sleepwear, glued to the TV while I managed the rest. "Sweetie, how about whipping up a nice meal for supper? Rough shift at the job today," he remarked, yanking a beer from the fridge like it was nothing. "Rough day," I blurted out despite myself. "I figured you hadn't stepped out all morning." He shot back that he works remotely on Tuesdays, his voice dripping with irritation, like I had zero business prying into his routine. Online conferences, crucial phone chats, it's all so overwhelming. So I deserve some downtime once it's over. I glanced at the time, 4:30 p.m. If he'd actually been working from the house, his shift had clocked in at just 3 hours, given how I'd caught him dozing on the sofa at 1 p.m. "Anyway," he went on, gulping down a big pull from his beer, "Renata and I chatted about a few extra guidelines to keep things flowing better around here. Like, you ought to honor our chill time. When we're lounging in the den catching shows on TV, it'd be ideal if you skipped the clanging from chores or meal prep. But the timetable insists I cook right now," I countered, waving the sheet I was still clutching. "Sure, but keep it quiet, or shift it earlier when we're not unwinding. It's just about smarter planning." The inconsistency was ridiculous. I was bound to fixed cooking slots, yet I couldn't disrupt their leisure windows, which seemed to span almost the entire day. I had to stick to rigid protocols that bent whenever it suited them. Renata wandered back into the kitchen, flashing a grin that never touched her gaze. It was that calculated smirk she'd honed since her teen years, the kind she deployed to get her way or drop a cutting remark, all wrapped in fake worry. "Mom, I also need to discuss your sleeping quarters," she mentioned, propping herself against the counter like she ruled the roost. "Gustavo and I figure it's smarter if you switch to the little back room. We require the main suite since it's roomier and we have more belongings." The main suite. My main suite. The space where I'd rested for 3 decades, where I'd sobbed following my husband's passing, where I'd envisioned raising my grandkids in a warm, nurturing space. Now they aim to shuffle me off to the cramped servants' quarters. No exaggeration. "That spot's tiny, Renata," I noted, my words faltering. "It can hardly fit a single bed." "It's ideal for you, Mom. You don't require much room regardless. Plus, it'll free up space for a larger wardrobe with our outfits and the children's gear. It's more efficient for all of us. More efficient for all of us." That phrase excused every slight, every erosion of self-respect, every inch toward fading into a ghost in my own existence. "Oh," and Gustavo chimed in, "the petite room's nearer the kitchen. You'll find it simpler to rise at dawn for breakfast prep without rousing anybody. Naturally, my reassigned spot in the home was designed to boost my role as household help, positioned by the cooking area for quicker service, distanced from the core zones to avoid pestering the real residents. So when's the relocation happening?" I inquired, even though I knew I lacked any true say. "This weekend sounds great," Renata answered brightly, like we were booking a getaway. "Gustavo can assist with the bulky items, or rather, the handful of belongings you'll pack. We're keeping most of the main suite's pieces for ourselves. The pieces I'd selected, like the sturdy oak bureau from my initial paycheck, the dressing table with the mirror where I'd prepped for our nuptials, the double bed where Renata had been born, all that was now theirs for practicality's sake." Ethan burst into the kitchen, clutching his tablet, face full of urgency. "Grandma, my device is out of juice and I require the cord." "Where's it at?" "In my space, sweetie." "Grab it yourself," I responded on instinct. "No way," Renata cut in sharply. "Ethan, you don't enter Grandma's area uninvited. She'll fetch the cord once snack's ready." The degradation was total. Even my own grandson couldn't step inside freely now. Yet Renata and Gustavo held the power to dictate my relocation timing, which furnishings stayed mine, and what corner I could occupy. Oh, and one final point, Mom, Renata pressed on, like the demands were bottomless. Sundays are our bonding time as a unit. Gustavo and I aim for meaningful moments with the little ones, so it'd help if you scheduled outings then. Head to the green, see a pal, anything goes. We simply crave room to function as a household. Sundays, my bonding day as well. The occasion I'd set aside for years to share fun outings with my grandkids, whip up treats jointly, snuggle through films on the sofa. Now it marked the hour I turned into an outsider under my roof. And what am I expected to do each Sunday? I wondered, hot tears gathering. No idea, Mom. I'm sure you've got acquaintances. Stroll around, attend services. Folks your age have plenty of options. The key is carving out your pursuits, easing up on leaning on us for fun. That evening, sleep evaded me. I stared at the overhead that wouldn't stay mine much longer, pondering how I'd arrived at That's the crux of it. When exactly did I stop being their mom and turn into their maid? When did I forfeit my say in my own house? I recalled the day Renata showed up with Gustavo and the kids. It was 2 years back, after they'd been evicted from their place because Gustavo had been let go from his old job. They pulled up teary-eyed, wrapping me in tight embraces and swearing it'd just be a short stint till they got back on their feet money-wise. "You're our lifeline, Mom," Renata had said that very first evening. "We'd be lost without you. You're the greatest mom ever." Those initial weeks felt almost joyful. It was a delight to have the home buzzing with energy once more, echoes of the kids' giggles bouncing off the walls that had gone quiet since my husband's passing. Renata pitched in on meal prep. Gustavo tackled a few small fixes around the place, and the youngsters warmed my soul with their impromptu cuddles. But bit by bit, so subtly I didn't catch on until it was irreversible, the dynamic shifted. It started with Renata requesting I mind the children while she scouted for work. Next came Gustavo assuming I'd handle supper since his job hunts had worn him out. Soon enough, it was routine for me to cover the shopping bills, seeing as we were all sharing meals under this roof. Each act of kindness I offered morphed into a demand. Every loving deed solidified into a duty. Every instance I brushed off a plea with "no worries," I was essentially agreeing to my own heartfelt enslavement. At 3 a.m., the sounds from the kitchen pulled me awake. I slipped out of bed soundlessly and padded along the corridor, spotting Gustavo pouring cereal straight from the carton, scattering bits across the counter I'd just wiped down before turning in. "Gustavo, you all right?" I murmured, careful not to rouse the little ones. He jumped a bit, like a kid busted in the act. "Yeah, just a hunger pang, no big deal. But hey, tomorrow I'll serve it properly in bowls for the kids," I added, noting the package was nearly bare. "Aw, sweetie, no need for the theatrics. It's only cereal. Grab some fresh tomorrow," he shot back, dumping the empty container on the surface and shuffling off to the bedroom. My bedroom. There I lingered in the shadows, sweeping away his mess, grasping that this was my reality, tidying their chaos quietly in the dead of night while he dozed in my space, utterly oblivious to the fallout from his carelessness. Come Friday morning, while I fixed breakfast per my freshly imposed routine, Renata bounded down the stairs, radiating a vibe I hadn't witnessed in ages. She sported a crimson gown I didn't know and footwear pricier than my entire weekly food budget. "Mom, I need you handling the kids the whole weekend," she declared, filling up my cherished mug, the one adorned with tiny floral designs that my husband gifted me for our 5th wedding anniversary, with coffee. "Gustavo and I are off to a romantic getaway at that city center hotel. We gotta rediscover our spark amid all the chaos." "A romantic getaway," I echoed, my astonishment plain to see. "And where's the cash coming from?" "Oh, Mom, forever fixated on finances," she chuckled in that fake, rehearsed way of hers. "Gustavo snagged a work bonus. We've earned some downtime after all we've endured." A bonus. For Gustavo, who clocked just 3 hours daily from the house. Yet somehow that windfall never stretched to restocking cereal or chipping in for home costs. It only covered fancy stays and love escapes. "And the children will manage fine with me for the full 2 days?" I queried, even though I sensed my input was irrelevant. "Absolutely. You're their Nana. It's instinctive for you to watch them. Plus, your updated timetable slots weekends for kid-focused fun and thorough tidying," she explained, eyes glued to her screen the whole time. She wasn't wrong. On my so-called service calendar, Saturdays and Sundays were earmarked for heavy-duty childcare and exhaustive cleaning sessions. Evidently, my downtime vanished in their version of household harmony. "Renata, we have to discuss this," I stated, sensing a snap deep within. "It simply can't continue." She glanced up from her device, her face registering real bewilderment, as though she couldn't fathom my pushback on this plainly sensible setup. "Discuss what, Mom? Your recent pessimism. 'Cause yeah, I've picked up on how sour you've been. Perhaps, at your stage in life, a doctor's visit is in order. Mood swings from hormone shifts are common. Hormone shifts. My outrage over the mistreatment got labeled a health issue I had to address. My push against the degradation became a sign of aging that demanded expert care. "I'm not ill, Renata. I'm exhausted from being handled like hired help in my own residence," I countered, startling even myself with how sharp I sounded. "Hired help," she echoed, adopting a hurt look that could have earned her an acting trophy. "Mom, how dare you? We're your kin. The thing is, in a family, everyone pulls their weight. Ours is bringing in the paychecks. Yours is to, that's all it boils down to, keeping the household going without a break. So why am I stuck covering every single bill and putting in non-stop effort around the clock?" I pressed on, my words shaky at first, but gaining force. "Mom, nobody forced you into non-stop work," Ranada shot back. "That timetable we laid out for you is totally fair. You've got downtime in between the chores. Use it to relax, catch some TV, or do anything that suits you." I glanced over at the schedule stuck on the fridge door. The so-called breaks it listed were just 30-minute slots amid the duties. Barely time to hit the restroom or grab a drink, let alone actually unwind. And what about the cash? Why should I foot the whole bill when you've got your own earnings? I pushed further. "We're stashing it away for what's ahead, Mom. We can't blow it on day-to-day stuff when we've got big plans brewing. You've already run your race. You got your shot at building security and mapping out your path. Now it's time for us to step up." Their argument hit like a gut punch with its harshness. By their logic, my days of living fully were done, and my job now was to bankroll and smooth the way for their ambitions. The retirement fund from my 4 decades of labor meant nothing compared to their future dreams. Gustavo strolled into the kitchen then, all dressed up and ready to head out, flashing a grin that grated on me more each time. He leaned in toward Ranada and planted a kiss on her cheek, a clear mark of ownership and shared secrets that shut me out entirely. "Ready for our getaway?" he said to her, acting like I wasn't right there, just a couple feet off. "Yep, darling. I've gone over it all with Mom. She'll handle the little ones and the place while we're gone," Ranada answered, treating me like some item she'd slotted into their plans. "Sounds good, sweetheart." "Oh, one last bit," Gustavo added, turning to me at last. "Come Monday. My mom's dropping by for a stretch. She'll want the spare room, so make sure it's pristine. She also prefers an early start to the day. Breakfast around 6 a.m. That shouldn't be an issue, right?" His mom. Yet another guest I'd have to cater to, nourish, and wait on in what used to feel like my own space. One more person to support out of my pocket. Someone else who'd demand my help as if it were the expected order of things. "How many days will she be here?" I ventured, already dreading the response. "Not sure yet. It'll hinge on her mood. She's been pretty isolated since Dad passed, so we figured some family time might cheer her up," he said, as though my home was an open-door inn for anyone craving companionship. "Gustavo, your mom and I have never really clicked," I pointed out, recalling the handful of encounters and her cool disregard for me. Oh, come on, those old grudges are behind us. You've got to move past it and let go. Plus, she's getting on in years. She deserves looking after. I'm betting you'll warm up to her once you spend more time together. Looking after. Of course, that'd fall to me, unpaid and unthanked, all while Ranada and Gustavo snuck off for their cozy escape. I'd be whipping up dawn meals for a lady who saw me as beneath her. And Mom. Ranada chimed in while slipping on the earrings that finished her look. When your mother-in-law shows up, it'd be nice to let her have the main suite. We can crash in the kids' space for a bit. She ought to feel at ease. The primary bedroom, which they'd already claimed from me, now they'd handed over to Gustavo's mother. Here in my house, I'd end up in the tiniest spot, while this outsider took over my bed, my things, and my duties. That getaway weekend turned into a horror show worse than my worst fears. Ranada and Gustavo took off Friday at 2 p.m. after handing me yet another rundown of kid handling rules. Exact meal times, learning sessions, capped TV hours, and rigid bedtimes. Stick to the rules, Mom. It's key. Ranada had warned me right before hopping into the cab I'd shelled out for to their city center spot. Kids thrive on routine. If you let them run wild this time, it'll take forever to earn their obedience back. Ethan and Valerie eyed me hopefully, counting on me to juggle fun, meals, lessons, and supervision in one go. It wasn't on them, naturally. They were just kids caught in a setup where Grandma fixed it all, as their folks savored perks I'd long since lost track of. Come Saturday morning, while I whipped up pancakes following Ranada's strict diet guidelines, Ethan knocked over his orange juice onto the family room carpet. A typical mishap, the sort that comes with having young ones around. But as I went to scrub it up, I saw we were short on supplies. Grandma, Mom says stains have to get wiped right away, or they're wrecked for good, Valerie told me solemnly. Professional oversight. She had a point. Ranada had stressed the importance of maintaining a pristine home while they were away. Thus, come Saturday morning at 9 a.m., I ended up heading to the grocery store alongside the two kids, dipping into $30 from my retirement funds for cleaning supplies to tackle a mess that basic soap could have handled. In the store, Ethan spotted the fancy cereal his dad favored, the kind that ran $8 per box, and pleaded for it. Valerie pointed out the premium cookies her mom always got her, packaged at $10 a pop. I scanned the costs, frantically tallying up in my head, aware that each buck I dropped meant one less for my personal essentials. "Why are you taking forever to pick, Grandma?" Ethan grumbled, fidgeting as I eyed the various laundry soaps. "Just figuring out the best option, sweetie," I fibbed, unwilling to break it to an 8-year-old that his Nana was weighing his snacks against her own prescriptions. Back at the house, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Ranada. "Mom, I trust you picked up fresh produce for the whole week. By Sunday, when we return, everything needs to be immaculate, and the pantry stocked. We can't pull up to a barren place after our chill getaway." More fresh veggies, another $50 unaccounted for, extra time trudging around with the little ones since cab fare would now go to groceries, and yet another chunk of my weekend poured into catering to folks lounging in a high-end resort, all thanks to the savings from my unpaid labor. Come Sunday afternoon, as I scrubbed the place from ceiling to floor ahead of Renata and Gustavo's grand homecoming, a phone call came through that shifted my world. It was Lucy, my neighbor for 15 years. The sole soul who really grasped my plight, even though I'd never laid it all out plainly. "Sweetie, you holding up all right?" "You've been acting off lately," she said in that comforting tone that evoked chats free from clocks or checklists. "Yeah, I'm good," I responded on autopilot, smoothing out Gustavo's garments I'd laundered and pressed throughout the days. "No, you're not. I've noticed you slipping out at dawn like you're late for something urgent, and you're hauling grocery bags inside nearly daily. What's brewing over there?" She pressed on with that soft determination that marks real companionship. For an instant, I nearly ended the call. It felt simpler to keep up the facade that all was routine, that it made sense for a 66-year-old to function as a maid in her very own dwelling. Yet Lucy's tone cracked my resolve. "Lucy, could you swing by quick? I need to vent to somebody," I blurted, caught off guard by my candor. "Be right there," she answered. No prying needed. When Lucy showed up, the kids were glued to the TV in the den, lost in their programs. We settled in the kitchen amid the spotless setup I'd arranged for their folks' return, and after months of silence, I finally shared the raw details of my existence with another person. I revealed the timetable. I detailed the finances. I described the ultimatum of eviction from my home if I refused to serve as their no-cost help. I spoke of the cramped space, the sidelined family Sundays, Gustavo's mom who would descend to have me wait on her in my own bedroom. Lucy absorbed it all quietly, her face shifting from shock to dismay, then to the rawest fury I'd witnessed in ages. "Darling, this qualifies as mistreatment," she declared at last, her words landing like a jolt of truth. "It's not right. Loving kin don't operate this way." But they claim it's equitable. Everyone pitches in with their duties in a family. I started echoing the lines drilled into me repeatedly. "No," she cut in sharply, her resolve startling me. "Healthy families negotiate responsibilities together. Nobody forces grueling, wage-free routines on others. Nobody dangles homelessness over a loved one's head. That's not affection, dear. That's straight up taking advantage." The term lingered heavily in the space between us. Taking advantage. Not mere family glitches, not clashing eras, not my struggle to fit into today's world, just blatant taking advantage. But what options do I have? I wondered aloud as suppressed tears finally broke free after so many months. They've got a point. At my age, on my fixed income, where would I even land? Who'd take me in? "Darling, eyes on me," Lucy urged, clasping my hands firmly. "You're 66, not ancient at 96. This house is yours, your pension's reliable, and your mind's as sharp as ever from what I can tell. You don't rely on them for survival. They're the ones leaning on you." Her straightforward, game-changing view stunned me into quiet. I'd long convinced myself I was fortunate just to have shelter, overlooking that it was my shelter. I'd convinced myself I ended up reaping the rewards of their so-called kindness. But truthfully, it was them who gained from my sacrifices. "Plus," Lucy went on, "are you seriously expecting things to improve as time passes? Do you believe they'll suddenly open their eyes one morning and choose to honor you properly? Sweetie, it's only going to deteriorate further. Each boundary you let them breach turns into the baseline for their behavior toward you from then on." She nailed it. That rigid timetable didn't spring up out of nowhere. It stemmed from 2 years of steadily chipping away at my self-worth, minor compromises that morphed into norms, kind acts that evolved into duties. "What steps would you take if you were me?" I inquired, even though deep down I was wondering if I'd muster the guts to act on what I knew was necessary. "I'd boot them out of my place first thing tomorrow," she shot back instantly. "And if you're not ready for that move just yet, begin establishing limits at the very least. Bill them for your efforts, insist on courtesy under your own roof, make it clear who's truly in charge here." The rumble of a vehicle pulling up interrupted us. Renatata and Gustavo were back from their lover's getaway, sun-kissed and at ease, prepared to slip right back into the pattern where I functioned as their live-in servant, and they played the gracious overseers. "Sweetie," Lucy said as she departed, "whenever you want to vent, whenever you require support, whenever you need a nudge to remember you're worthy of real respect, reach out anytime around the clock, and mull this over. If a housekeeper put in the shifts you do and shelled out cash just to keep the gig, how many days do you reckon they'd stick it out?" That thought lingered with me as Renatata and Gustavo stepped through the door, scrutinizing whether I'd fulfilled every one of their demands while they were gone. It stuck as they griped about the empty milk carton in the fridge and the shortage of fresh linens for Gustavo's mom's arrival. That evening, stretched out in my soon-to-be former bed, I started pondering something I hadn't in ages. What if I just flat out refused? The dawn of Monday hit like a whirlwind of indignities. The doorbell pierced the silence at 5:30 a.m., jarring me awake. There stood Marissa, Gustavo's mom, at my threshold lugging 2 massive bags and wearing the face of royalty awaiting a royal welcome. "About time," she huffed, skipping any hello as she shoved her luggage indoors. That cab dragged on endlessly. I trust Gustavo filled you in on my particular morning meal requirements. My digestion is quite sensitive. I can't handle random fare. It was barely 5:45 a.m. I hadn't even splashed water on my face or run a brush through my tousled locks. Yet here I was, absorbing directives on the dietary quirks of a lady who'd barged into my space with no end in sight. "Good morning, Marissa," I croaked out, my throat scratchy from the rude awakening. "Gustavo mentioned your visit, but of course, that's all sorted," she cut in, surveying my home with a judgmental gaze, though it's clear this spot could use some fixes. "Where's my quarters?" The journey's left me exhausted. My quarters, the primary suite they'd already claimed from me, now hers for the duration of her open-ended visit. I guided her along the corridor, hauling one of her bags that felt packed with boulders, all while she nitpicked every detail of my furnishings she found wanting. "That carpet's threadbare," she noted, gesturing at the Persian piece I'd cherished for years. "And those drapes are overly gloomy. In my years, I require plenty of sunlight. You'll swap them out by morning." Swap them using my funds naturally to suit an unwelcome visitor more snugly in what used to be my domain. Upon entering the main bedroom, Marissa scrutinized it all like a commander eyeing his ranks. She yanked open cabinets, tested the bed by bouncing on it variably, and at last proclaimed, "This'll suffice. Still, you'll need to launder every bit of bedding using allergen-free soap. I won't rest in anything less than pristine. Allergen-free soap, yet another surprise buy, yet another hit to my thinning retirement funds. Right on cue at 6 o'clock. As Gustavo had assured, Marissa materialized in the kitchen, anticipating her custom meal. She sported a satin robe and fluffy mules, acting like the proprietor of a high-end resort rather than a visitor in my abode. 2 eggs scrambled extra firm, oil-free, whole grain bread lightly browned, no charring, coffee faint as herbal brew, and fruit solely at peak ripeness. She listed her orders like items from a script I'd supposedly committed to memory. I was out of eggs, no whole grain loaves in stock, no fresh produce either, since I'd blown through my budget over the weekend on the kids' fancies and supplies to spruce up the place for Ranatata and Gustavo's homecoming. "Marissa, I don't have precisely what you're—" She wasn't requesting anything extravagant, but I could whip up something comparable. I started to clarify. "What do you mean there's nothing like that?" She cut me off, her outrage echoing through the whole kitchen. "Gustavo never mentioned what I required. This is outrageous. A home lacking the essentials for a proper morning meal." Just then, Gustavo stepped into the kitchen, suited up for his workday, sporting that irritated look he got whenever his meticulously planned schedule got disrupted. "What's all the commotion about? Why the racket this early?" he demanded, even though it was his mom who'd been raising her voice. "Your maid hasn't stocked the place with groceries," Marissa shot back, jabbing a finger at me like I was some broken appliance. "How am I supposed to eat breakfast without the fundamentals?" Maid. She didn't even try to sugarcoat it. I was nothing more than hired help in her eyes, the lowly worker in her son's home, expected to cater to her whims without a peep. "Sweetheart, didn't you hit the grocery store over the weekend?" "Ora?" Gustavo quizzed me in that scolding tone he'd honed to perfection, the kind that left me feeling like a naughty kid. I did, actually, but I used the cash on what Renata wanted for the kids, and I started to elaborate. "Oh, come on," he snapped, interrupting. "You're full of justifications as usual. My mom deserves a real breakfast. Head to the store right away and get what's missing, and do a better job planning next time. Trek to the supermarket at 7 a.m. Shell out more funds I didn't possess just to appease a lady who regarded me like garbage right in my own space. Meanwhile, Gustavo geared up for his 3-hour daily gig, and Renata snoozed away undisturbed in the kids' room. And what about cash? I challenged, a resolve building inside me. I'd already blown through everything from the weekend. Use your retirement check, duh, Gustavo retorted, as if it had been the dumbest query imaginable. Isn't that what your earnings are for? Keeping things afloat around here. My pension's tied up for the month already, I stated, my voice steady in a way that caught even me off guard. No extra funds for surprise outlays. The quiet that ensued was thick enough to slice. Gustavo stared at me like I'd committed heresy, while Marissa wore the face of someone who'd seen the wildest uprising ever. So, you're saying you won't get provisions for my mom? Gustavo pressed, his tone rising in a fury that might have been laughable if it weren't so heartless. What I'm saying is, I lack the resources at the moment, I restated, striving to stay even-keeled. This is beyond belief, Marissa burst out, turning to her son like I wasn't even there. This is the caliber of help this household gets. A worker balking at simple errands. Darling, we can't let this slide, Gustavo declared, slipping into the voice he'd use on a troublesome underling. If you're unable to handle the core duties of running this place, maybe it's time to rethink our setup. There it was, that subtle yet unmistakable ultimatum. Would I bow to their expectations, or vacate my own property? Would I cater to the clan endlessly, or forfeit my stake in the home I'd purchased and financed myself? Right then, Renata wandered in, clad in her sleepwear but alert from the quarrel's clamor. Her arrival shifted the vibe instantly, like a boss stepping in to settle a workplace spat. "What's the issue?" she inquired, despite clearly eavesdropping from the corridor. "Your mom won't make a run to the store for my mom's breakfast," Gustavo filled her in, sounding like a kid tattling on a playmate's mischief. "Mom," Renata said in that crestfallen lilt she'd mastered back in her teen years, "is it really true you're unwilling to grab some eats for Nana Marisa?" The ploy was flawless. They'd recast my stand against dipping into non-existent funds as a heartless denial of sustenance to a vulnerable senior. They'd twisted my effort to draw simple fiscal lines into blatant greed. "It's not about unwillingness," I countered, bracing for charges I oughtn't have to disprove. "The fact is, I've depleted this month's budget, leaving no room for extras." "Oh, Mom, you're always blowing money matters out of proportion," Renata huffed theatrically. "What could a breakfast run set you back? $10, 15 tops. You're not seriously claiming you can't spare $1 to nourish your kin." $15 that had ballooned to 30 the next day, 45 soon after. An endless siphon from my fixed income to indulge a woman who made no secret of her contempt for me. Plus, Gustavo chimed in, "Mom's stay isn't permanent. It's just short-term till she settles into solo living. Can't you handle this minor concession for the sake of everybody? Short-term." The very term they'd tossed out 2 years back when they first showed up for what was billed as a brief stint of a few months. The same that hollow assurance they'd always leaned on to excuse each fresh intrusion into my privacy, each additional claim on my schedule, every fresh drain on my finances. "And how long will Marissa be sticking around?" I inquired, even though I sensed the response wouldn't sit well with me. "We're not entirely sure," Gustavo answered evasively. "It hinges on her mood if she discovers things to enjoy nearby, and how smoothly she settles into the household rhythm." The household rhythm! My endless cycle of waiting on them, tidying up, preparing meals, all while footing the bill for the honor. The pattern in which I functioned as their unpaid housekeeper for a clan that had claimed my home as their entitlement. Right then, planted in my kitchen, getting lectured for hesitating to dip into my retirement funds for the caprices of a lady who regarded me as disposable, a decisive fracture occurred within me. It lacked the flair of a sudden revelation. Rather, it resembled a levee giving way, an initial fissure, followed by a steady trickle, culminating in an overwhelming surge of insight. "All right," I responded with a steadiness that caught me off guard. I'll head to the store and pick up whatever Marissa requires for her morning meal." The tension in the room eased at once, as though my yielding had reinstated the expected cosmic balance, with me complying unquestioningly. Yet my tone carried a subtle shift, one they overlooked, accustomed as they were to presuming my compliance. "Great, Mom," Renata remarked, flashing that patronizing grin she saved for my moments of supposed clarity. "I figured you'd eventually grasp how vital it is to help Grandma Marissa feel at home." I changed into my clothes swiftly and headed out to the market, but on this occasion I bypassed the grocery aisles initially. Instead, I made my way to the drugstore within the mall where an ATM awaited, not to fetch cash for Marissa's breakfast, but for an entirely unrelated purpose. I pulled out $200 from my emergency fund, funds I'd tucked away for crises. Yet I recognized this as the gravest crisis imaginable, reclaiming my self-respect before it slipped away forever. Clutching the bills, I proceeded to a law firm's address I'd spotted in the community paper. It was still early, just past 8:30 a.m., yet the front desk lady let me know that David Miller offered urgent sessions starting at 9 so. "Is this urgent?" she inquired, a youthful staffer with a warm grin. "Absolutely," I affirmed promptly. "I believe so." David Miller proved to be a fellow in his 50s, sporting a tidy beard and a gaze reflecting the wisdom born of navigating countless thorny domestic disputes. "Tell me the story, Mrs. Everett," he started, glancing at the slip where I'd jotted my details. "Mrs. Everett," I echoed, and after ages, I uttered it with a trace of genuine self-assurance. "Counselor, I need clarity on my entitlements within my residence." I laid out the full ordeal, the imposed timetable, the warnings of ousting me from my own place, the monetary drain, Marissa's uninvited entrance. I went on for 20 minutes non-stop, like a barrier finally bursting. David absorbed it all silently, jotting notes now and then and offering nods that shifted from astonishment to outrage. Once I'd wrapped up, he reclined in his seat and met my eyes with a blend of empathy and resolute expertise. "Mrs. Everett, the scenario you're outlining amounts to financial and psychological mistreatment," he stated firmly, his words striking me like a thunderclap. "Your daughter and her husband are engaging in what's termed elder abuse under the law." "But don't they gain some claim after residing there for 2 years?" I pressed, recalling Gustavo's bluster about legal advice. "In certain instances, prolonged stays might allow for tenancy claims," he clarified. "However, such claims never extend to mistreating the homeowner, enforcing free labor, or unilaterally adding occupants without permission." A massive burden seemed to dissolve from my frame. For the first time in months, validation arrived. My view of events rang true. I wasn't overreacting or unappreciative. What steps can I take? I wondered aloud, the query laced, for the first time in ages, with optimism rather than defeat. "Plenty of options," he answered, reviewing his scribbles. "Start by sending written notice that you're ending any casual living arrangement. Next, set firm boundaries on property access and your funds. Then, demand that unapproved visitors leave at once." "And if they push back?" I ventured, envisioning my relatives' backlash to those directives. "In that case, we pursue remedies like eviction proceedings and abuse filings, though from my practice, once relatives see the situation's gravity. If an older individual receives proper legal guidance and grasps their entitlements, they often adjust their actions swiftly. David mentioned he could prepare a formal notice right away, outlining fresh conditions for anybody wishing to stay in my residence. Conditions that demanded full market rent payments, fair sharing of home costs, and total deference to my position as the property owner. How much would such advice run me? I inquired, worried it might exceed my budget. For situations involving mistreatment of seniors, we offer reduced fees, he responded with a comforting grin. $100 for the first meeting and $200 to compose the required official alerts. Should matters escalate to litigation, we'd explore installment options. $300 total, equivalent to what I'd shelled out over 2 weeks supporting my relatives, or what Ranita and Gustavo had blown on just one evening of their getaway. After ages, it felt like a smart investment for once. "Attorney Miller, please go ahead and create those notices today," I declared, pulling cash from my purse with steady fingers. "Wise choice, Mrs. Everett. They'll be finished by this afternoon. Would you like me to hand them over directly to your family or handle it personally?" "I'll do it myself," I answered promptly. I believe it's high time for a straightforward discussion with them. Stepping out of the attorney's building, I sensed a total transformation in myself. Not that I'd instantly recovered every bit of self-assurance, but after months, I finally possessed a strategy. I had expert backing. I had protections under the law that threats or psychological tactics couldn't strip away. Yet prior to heading back, one additional errand awaited. I visited the bank and conferred with the branch head regarding updating my account passwords and imposing tight restrictions on who could conduct dealings in my name, experiencing issues with improper account entries. The manager queried, a sharp lady who quickly grasped my predicament. "I'd rather ensure that solely I manage my finances moving forward," I stated. "A prudent move," she noted as she updated everything. "Care to check on approvals for your credit cards, too? Spot-on inquiry. Renata had been charging my card for months over so-called crises that never got settled. Those crises needed to fall on others now. Revoke every extra permission," I instructed resolutely. "Just me for accounts and cards from here on." By the time I arrived home, it neared 11 a.m., 4 hours since I'd ostensibly gone for Marissa's meal, returning without a single bag but armed with far better, a strategy and the professional aid to carry it out. Gustavo was off at his job, yet Renata and Marissa lounged in the den, evidently irritated by my tardiness. The kids were in class, granting us seclusion for the talk ahead. "At last!" Marissa burst out as I walked in. "What took you so long? Nearly 11 away, and I'm starving." "And the groceries," Renata chimed in, spotting my empty arms. "We need to discuss matters," I stated, tone even yet resolute. "The three of us, immediately." My delivery must have signaled something, as they both quieted, eyeing me with surprise and wariness, absent for quite a while. "Take a seat," I directed toward the couch. "This chat will alter plenty around here." "I've just come from an attorney's," I started, observing their faces shift from annoyance to unease in moments, and discovered quite a few key details on my privileges as this home's proprietor. The ensuing quiet was profound. Renata gazed at me with that guilty look from her childhood days after mischief. Marissa appeared truly baffled, as though puzzled why a domestic worker might seek legal counsel. "Mom, what's going on?" Renata ventured, feigning worry but betraying anxiety. "Why consult a lawyer behind our backs?" "Because I needed clarity on my standing in my very own place," I countered calmly. "And reality differs sharply from what you've implied." I produced the papers David had assembled so rapidly. 3 formal notices on embossed stationery, targeted at Renata, Gustavo, and Marissa each. The sheet's heft in my grip mirrored reclaiming my self-respect. "These serve as official summonses," I went on, laying them upon the low table. "Read them here or await formal service later today. The terms remain identical." Renata rose at once and snatched hers. She scanned the document at a frantic pace, her eyes betraying how urgently she needed to grasp the gravity of it all. Marissa accepted her copy with shaky fingers as I observed her smug demeanor slowly crumble into disbelief. "This is absurd," Renata burst out after skimming just the opening paragraph. "You have no right to evict us. We're your relatives." "I'm not evicting anyone," I responded with a composure that caught even me off guard. "I'm simply proposing you remain here on updated terms, ones that are equitable and lawful." The guidelines in Renata's notice laid it out plainly. To keep residing in my home, she'd need to cover $800 monthly rent, split all domestic costs equally, and honor my position as the homeowner along with my entitlement to personal space in my bedroom. $800, she yelled, brandishing the sheet like some vicious prank. Mom, you realize we don't have funds like that. Perhaps it's time to seek actual employment, I shot back, mirroring the patronizing edge she'd mastered when addressing me, or locate somewhere you can manage on your earnings. Marissa had completed her read-through and stared at me like I'd descended into madness. Her directive was more straightforward. She had 48 hours to leave the premises, since her stay lacked the owner's approval. You wouldn't dare, she faltered, her tone cracking under outrage. I'm elderly. You can't toss me onto the sidewalk like some felon. I'm not dumping you on the sidewalk, I countered resolutely. I'm suggesting you head back to your residence or secure lodging where you're truly wanted, rather than an unwanted obligation. Gustavo won't stand for this, she warned, rising from the couch with a vigor absent since she'd shown up. He'll stand up for his mom. Gustavo can stand up for his mom at your place, I stated, gesturing toward the exit. This is my domain and my guidelines hold sway here. Renata stayed quiet, poring over the notice repeatedly, as though willing the text to alter itself. At last she raised her gaze, tears glistening, not from sincere grief, but the strategic kind she'd wielded since girlhood to bend circumstances her way. Mom, how could you treat us like this? She mewled, feigning utter heartbreak. We adore you. All we desired was a close-knit household, and this is your repayment. You sick attorneys on us. A close-knit household doesn't impose labor timetables on anyone. I stood my ground against her theatrics. A close-knit household doesn't warn of expulsion from a family member's dwelling unless they consent to unpaid servitude. We never warned of expulsion, she objected, despite us both knowing that's precisely their ploy. Ranatata, I've got the roster you handed me, I declared, pulling the wrinkled timetable from my bag. Right there at the bottom, it explicitly notes that if I reject these terms, you'll accept my choice to relocate elsewhere. What would you label that? She went mute briefly, scrambling for a spin on her own script. In the end, she shifted tactics. All right, perhaps the timetable was overly rigid, she conceded, shifting to a placating manner. We could adjust it, show some give, no call for legal intervention in domestic squabbles. It's not merely the timetable, Ranata, I pressed on, gaining resolve with every phrase. You've reduced me to your complimentary maid. You've treated my retirement funds as your personal stash. You've welcomed outsiders into my space without clearance and anticipated my hospitality. Marissa, who'd grown more restless amid our exchange, at last erupted. This is insane. Gustavo described a warm household. He never mentioned cohabiting with a deranged senior who views her property as an inn. Exactly. I met her stare head on. It's no inn. It's my residence. And here, visitors are summoned, not foisted upon me. But I'm Gustavo's mom, she bellowed, implying that alone granted her dominion over my belongings. And I'm the proprietor of this abode. I fired back, with an assertiveness I hadn't realized I had. Your tie to Gustavo doesn't entitle you to claim my space. Renata had been mulling quietly, likely tallying the true expenses of going solo. When she piped up next, her words carried a frantic edge I'd never detected before. Mom, let's face facts, she urged, aiming for sensibility. We can't swing $800 rent on top of shared bills. You get that. Plus, you shouldn't be on your own at this stage in life. We're interdependent. I've managed solo before, I reminded her. I spent 10 years by myself after your dad's passing, prior to your arrival, and I thrived, thanks. But you're more advanced in years now, she pushed, resorting to the seniority ploy as her final gambit. What would you do if illness struck? How would you handle needing assistance? I'd bring in paid experts if necessary, I replied. The thought had just popped into my head, yet it felt entirely reasonable. Plenty of agencies cater to the elderly, billing for quality care delivered with dignity and expertise. You'd rather shell out cash to outsiders than let your kin step up. She shot back, as though the notion insulted her deeply. I'd opt for paid pros over getting taken advantage of by folks who bank on my affection for them, I clarified. That's a crucial distinction. Just then, the telephone buzzed. Gustavo was on the line, no doubt verifying that his mom had received adequate attention while he was away. Renata dashed to pick up, murmuring in hushed, frantic tones that screamed of a household emergency in progress. As she chatted, Marissa sidled over to me, her face shifting from outrage to a hint of admiration. For the first time, she regarded me like an actual individual rather than some chatty ornament. "Sweetie," she murmured, her tone much gentler now. "Perhaps we could work out a compromise. I don't need the main bedroom. Would the couch be okay for sleeping?" "Marissa," I cut in softly, "it's not about your sleeping spot. The issue is you showed up at my place uninvited, assuming endless VIP treatment. That doesn't work for anyone involved." Gustavo pulled into the driveway 20 minutes after Renata's conversation ended, wearing a look I'd never caught on him before. Gone was his typical smug superiority. This was far more ominous, the visage of someone grasping that his freeloading setup was crumbling. "Sweetie, we have to discuss this," he stated in a measured tone that didn't deceive me one bit. "Renata filled me in on those absurd documents from your quack attorney. David Miller isn't some fraud," I responded evenly. "He's an attorney focused on rental disputes, tenant laws, and safeguarding seniors. And those papers aren't silly. They're legitimate legal warnings. This feels like a stab in the back," he burst out, abandoning any facade of civility. "After all we've sacrificed for you, after providing companionship to chase away your loneliness, after breathing vitality into this lifeless shell of a home." Their twisted take on history was so absurd it nearly drew a chuckle from me. In their narrative, they'd been granting me a gift by crashing rent-free in my home, devouring my groceries, tapping my utilities, and blowing through my funds. "Gustavo, you're 42, I pointed out, summoning patience that strained my limits. "If a lively home is what you crave, go ahead and purchase one yourself and stock it with whatever energy suits you. But not on my dime. We've been scraping together cash for our own place," he bellowed, as if that excused 2 years of leeching. "It's tough to build savings amid all these costs. You can't fathom the price of parenting 2 kids. "Fair enough," I conceded, catching him off guard with my nod. I lack insight into child-rearing expenses, since, when I supported Renata, I covered every bill from my pocket. I never hunted down an elder to mooch off. Marissa, who'd watched the exchange from the couch, chose that moment to offer her brand of nurturing advice. "Sweetie, I get that you're muddled, but Gustavo's a solid dad and devoted boy. He shouldn't face this kind of handling from someone your age who's obviously unraveling." "Unraveling," I echoed, a blaze of anger flaring inside me. "For standing up for your own boundaries in your residence, for sicking attorneys on your relatives, rather than addressing issues like rational grown-ups," Marissa fired back with the ethical high ground she'd honed for decades. "Rational grown-ups don't dictate shifts to relatives," I fired back. "Rational grown-ups don't dangle eviction over the head of their own property owner." Gustavo had been striding across the den, evidently weighing his moves. When he halted, that familiar scheming glint appeared, the one signaling he was unleashing his ace. "All right, sweetie," he announced with a grin that never touched his gaze. "If legal games are your thing, we can join in, seeing as we've gotten advice on our protections, too." "Which protections?" I inquired, though I had a hunch about his angle. "Protections for renters who've occupied a space over 2 years, he declared victoriously. Protections for parents nurturing kids in a steady environment. Protections for a household that's preserved a rundown asset from further decay. It was precisely the gambit David had predicted they'd pull. The edge was, I was now ready to counter it. "Gustavo," I advised in a steady voice that plainly rattled him. Better run those supposed consultations by an actual attorney of yours. Since mine guarantee, he told me that no judge anywhere in the nation would uphold renters' privileges for folks who skipped payments and had been draining the homeowner's resources financially. Gustavo's face shifted right away. It was clear his so-called legal insights came from online Googling or chats with buddies, not from any legit expert. On top of that, I pressed on, revealing my trump card. My attorney had clued me in that your behavior qualifies as elder abuse, a serious offense under federal law. So, if you're keen on dragging more attorneys into this mess, be my guest. But heads up, the fallout for you will dwarf anything I might face. The quiet that settled in was total. Even the kids, who had come home from school midway through our clash and were eavesdropping from the corridor, froze in place. "Are you saying you'll take us to court?" Renata whispered, her voice soft like it hadn't been since her teen years. "I'm not issuing any threats," I shot back. "Just laying out the repercussions of what you've done, the very same ones my lawyer outlined for me today." Ethan showed up at the doorway to the den, backpack slung over his shoulders from school, looking utterly bewildered. "Why's everybody shouting? And why's Grandma in tears?" Sure enough, Marissa had begun weeping, though not from sorrow. Those were drops of fury and shame from a woman who grasped she'd utterly forfeited command over a scenario she believed was under her thumb. "Everything's fine, sweetie," I said to Ethan, stepping over to embrace him. "The grown-ups are just hashing out some key details about life in this home. Are we getting kicked out?" Valerie piped up, peeking from behind her brother with saucer-wide eyes. My grandkid's pure question pierced me deeply. Yet it also reinforced my resolve for pushing through this. These little ones merit an upbringing surrounded by bonds built on affection and reciprocity, free from abuse and deceit. "That hinges on what your mom and dad choose," I answered straightforwardly. "Should they opt to remain, honoring the household guidelines and pitching in equitably, they're welcome. Otherwise, they'll need to scout for different digs." "What kind of rules?" Ethan queried with that blunt wonder only kids possess. "Things like every able-bodied resident working and chipping in for costs," I clarified. "Or no pressuring kin to labor endlessly without breaks, or ensuring everyone gets dignity in treatment." Gustavo eyed me with a glare that might have scared me 7 days prior, but now just came off as pitiful. "Sweetie, aren't you mixing up the kids with this grown-up nonsense?" I fired back. They were already mixed up, from watching their Nana get bossed around like hired help, from overhearing their folks plot to boot her from her very own place. At least now they're getting an earful about alternative ways to function as kin. Renata drew near her offspring and pulled them into an embrace that could have seemed heartfelt, except it screamed of a ploy to stir sympathy. "Kids, head to your bedrooms and tackle that schoolwork. Us adults have more to discuss." Once the youngsters departed, the vibe in the den thickened further. It felt like we were all paused, anticipating the subsequent play in a board game whose guidelines had flipped upside down. "All right," Gustavo conceded at last, shifting to a bargaining lilt. "Suppose you're dead set on this. Suppose you truly expect us to cover rent and share bills. What's the deadline you're offering for us to sort ourselves out?" "The notices outline 30 days, I responded, glancing at the papers. 30 days to commit to the updated terms and begin following them, or 30 days to locate alternative housing. And as for my mom," he prodded, gesturing toward Marissa, who continued sniffling on the couch. "Your mom gets 48 hours, I stated resolutely. "There's no lease, formal or otherwise, tying her here with me. Her stay was forced, not welcomed. You can't evict an elderly lady on just 2 days' warning." Gustavo objected. "Watch me." "I absolutely can and will," I countered, startling even myself with my steadfastness. "Your mom owns her residence. If solitude doesn't suit her, she ought to seek a fitting senior community or bunk with family who've genuinely extended an invite." 3 months on, I stirred awake in my personal bedroom at 7 a.m., purely by choice, not some rigid timetable. The hush enveloping the home didn't unsettle me one bit. Quite the opposite. It rang as the sweetest melody I'd savored in ages, the melody of serenity. Marissa vacated on day 2, precisely per the eviction papers. She departed amid theatrical sobs and vows to cut ties forever, as though that'd be a hardship rather than a relief. Gustavo ended up scraping funds from his brothers and sisters for a motel stay, while she pondered her next chapter. Ultimately, she settled into an assisted living unit for seniors, where, I eventually learned afterward, she kept griping that the help wasn't nearly as capable as I'd been. In those initial 30 days, Renata and Gustavo experimented with every possible strategy. They began with outright rejection, claiming it was all just a mix-up and that they could sort it out among relatives without dragging in attorneys. Once that fell flat, they shifted to laying on the guilt trips. They wouldn't stop pointing out how I was forfeiting chances to watch my grandkids mature, implying that bonding with them meant I'd have to serve as their round-the-clock, no-cost nanny. Next up was rage. One evening, Gustavo screamed at me for a full 2 hours, labeling me self-centered, heartless, a lousy parent, and an outright terrible grandmother. Renata wept, pleaded, embraced me tightly, and even paraded the kids in front of me to plead for a reversal. Yet, for the first time in ages, I held my ground. David had coached me on handling each ploy, equipping me with composed, law-backed responses to counter their torrent of feelings. "Your actions will hurt the kids," Renata had accused me in one of her final manipulative pushes. "The kids will discover that solid family ties rest on equal regard, not on taking advantage," I'd shot back, echoing David's precise phrasing. The closing stage proved the most telling. In the final week prior to their exit, Renata and Gustavo switched to this over-the-top politeness that felt even more offensive than their earlier mistreatment. Out of nowhere, I became Mrs. Everett with endless pleases and "thank you so much for all you've done." It seemed they'd only recalled basic civility when it suited their agenda. "Mom, we truly hope you know we've always cared for you," Renata said to me that last morning as they departed. "Families just hit rough patches sometimes." Rough patches. 2 years of calculated draining boiled down to mere confusion, as though it were a mix-up over trash duty rather than a calculated effort to make me their gratis domestic. But at last, they were out. They relocated to a 2-bedroom rental across town, shelling out precisely $800 monthly for rent on top of utilities. Clearly, scraping together cash for some unknown property owner wasn't an issue. It was only for kin like me that their funds mysteriously ran short. Those initial days post-departure felt odd. The home seemed vast and hollow following 2 years crammed with non-stop clamor, pressing requests, and the endless tension of catering to others. Slowly, however, that void evolved into an entirely new sensation: liberation. I ate my morning meal whenever it suited me. I tuned into the programs I enjoyed. I chose meals driven by my own tastes, rather than the dietary whims of 4 others. My retirement funds went toward my personal wants, including little indulgences I'd long overlooked. The moment I picked up a bunch of fresh blooms for the dining table, tears welled up in the grocery store aisle. That $15 would have once covered fancy cereals or specialty soaps for surprise visitors. These days, it funded pure delight, just because it brought me joy. Lucy proved invaluable through it all. Beyond bolstering my determination amid the toughest stretches, she'd evolved into a genuine companion. We now shared lunches bi-weekly, browsed the weekend market on Saturdays, and had enrolled in art sessions at the local rec center. "Don't you long for the kids' lively chaos?" she queried one day as we brushed in our watercolors of scenic views. "I do miss my grandkids," I admitted candidly, "but not the role of their free, full-time caregiver. That's a world apart." And it rang true. Ethan and Valerie dropped by every second Saturday, per the setup we'd hammered out after heated discussions. Initially, Renata attempted to leverage those outings for leverage, hinting that uncooperative stances on the split terms might snag the scheduling. David recommended documenting all visitation talks in writing, routed via him, until Renata grasped she couldn't wield her offspring as leverage for coercion. In time, we'd forged a fair pact. The little ones arrived bi-weekly from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., and I whisked them off for enjoyable outings now feasible, since I wasn't bankrolling 4 grown-ups' habits. My bond with Ethan and Valerie transformed noticeably. Without the burden of nonstop oversight, no fretting over their schedules, rules, or endless amusement, I could just embrace being their Nana. I indulged them mildly, shared chuckles, absorbed their classroom tales, free from the nagging pull of impending chores. "Grandma, why aren't you staying with us these days?" Valerie had inquired on one of her initial trips over. "Well, grown-ups require their personal areas to stay content," I'd replied. "Your parents deserve their space to handle choices on their own, and I've got to have mine for the same reason." "But you care about us just the same, right?" She'd pressed, with that sincere worry that tugged at my emotions. "I cherish you beyond measure, sweetheart," I'd told her, pulling her into a close embrace. "And it's exactly that deep affection that pushes me to teach you how folks who truly care show respect and kindness to one another. They avoid using each other for gain." Ethan, being the elder and sharper one, grasped it all with unexpected wisdom. "Mom and Dad kept you busy all the time, huh, Grandma?" "That's right, dear," I'd confessed, though now we're figuring out improved methods to function as a unit. On that particular morning, 3 months following the major shift, I stirred awake to a sensation I'd long since misplaced. Optimistic anticipation, free from the dread of daily pressures, replaced by real interest in the positive options ahead. The week before, David had reached out to share that Renata and Gustavo had dropped all legal pursuits regarding my home. It seems their talks with actual attorneys validated what I'd sensed all along. They held zero lawful claim to the place, and pushing for one would have led straight to accusations of mistreating the elderly. "What's liberty like for you now, Mrs. Everett?" David had queried, flashing the kind grin I'd grown fond of. "It's akin to emerging from an endless bad dream," I'd said. "It's rediscovering that I'm an individual, not some possession." That day, I rose at my leisure, enjoyed whatever breakfast suited me, and got ready for my latest passion, dance sessions for seniors at the local community hub. At age 66, I was picking up salsa moves. I'd connected with fresh acquaintances and was unearthing hidden facets of my identity. Before heading out, I glanced in the bathroom mirror. The face staring back didn't carry that constant weariness and stress from the last 2 years. Her gaze sparkled, posture upright, and she'd regained something she'd lost sight of: poise. Stepping outside, I secured the door and headed to the bus with steady strides. This was my dwelling, my existence, my call. And after ages, those notions didn't unsettle me. They sparked joy, for I'd absorbed life's key insight. Reclaiming your sense of worth isn't bound by time. Once it's yours again, nobody can strip it. Regardless of the love shared, I'd realized, authentic bonds never demand you forfeit your self-worth, and real kin never push you to diminish yourself for their elevation. If my tale resonated with you, consider a super thanks to fuel more narratives like this. Appreciate it beforehand. Now, your turn. What steps would you take in my position? Share your views below. I'm eager for them. Also, tell me how you came across this. For additional real-life accounts, hit like on the video and hit subscribe. Plenty more await. Warm embraces, and catch you soon.